Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. I'm your host, Roger Connect, president of Universal Accounting Center, and this podcast is dedicated to you to help you actually have the premier accounting firm in your area, offering you tips and tricks, suggestions, ideas, things that you can implement in your business to ensure that you're offering quality accounting services and getting paid what you're worth, onboarding clients with confidence, retaining them, servicing them well, with your staff being trained and you having the pricing, the services, the quality that you need to in your community to ensure that your clients are getting the services that they need to excel in their own companies. Now, as a podcast, I definitely want to encourage you to subscribe and receive each of the notifications related to the episodes coming out each and every week as we visit with the experts, guests that I have on the show each and every week to ensure that you're learning what it is you can be doing to work on your business. Now, today I happen to have an amazing guest. He's been on the show before, and it's someone you'll definitely want to listen to. It's Mitchell Levy. Mitchell happens to be someone that I've known for a number of years, and he is the global credibility expert. He's a two-time TED speaker and an international best-selling author of over 60 books. He is an executive coach at Marshall Goodsmith 100 Coaches, and after interviewing over 500 thought leaders on credibility, he's published a 7-country international best-selling book, delivered a powerful TED Talk on humanity, created courses related to that, and created the Credibility Nation membership community to help those live, learn, and surround themselves with others on the credibility journey. Now, he's an accomplished entrepreneur who has created 20 businesses in the Silicon Valley, including 4 publishing companies that have published over 750 books. He's provided strategic consulting to hundreds of companies and has been the chairman of the board of a NASDAQ-listed company. Now, Mitchell has been happily married for 31 plus years, and prior to COVID, he would regularly spend 4 weeks a year in Europe with his family and friends. So, Mitchell, welcome to the show.
Roger, it's great to be here. It's kind of funny because, we talked about how to say your last name.
Yes.
And then when you mentioned mine and Marshall's, you got both of them wrong. So just for the record, I'll say, so I'm Mitchell Levy, and it's Marshall Goldsmith, for those that know Marshall.
Well, I apologize for that, but obviously the correction needs to be made. I don't want to slaughter anyone's name, so that's important.
Oh, don't worry about it. This is a podcast, and we should go as is. So this is great.
Yes, it is. So, Mitchell, let's start first of all with what I was familiar with, and it was reaching out to those leaders, those experts, and interviewing them. Give us an update. How has that gone, interviewing these 500 or more individuals over the last little while?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, by the way. So I started in 2019, finished a year later. So it was in August of 2020. And for me, you could say lightning hit me. You could say I had this epiphany. For me, I always say I had the most massive aha moment. And it was around July of 2020. And what ended up happening, and since then, by the way, Roger, I still do the interviews. I still want to verify what's going on. I still want to verify that the statistics that I came up with are still prevalent today. And so let me do a quickie on the stats.
Yeah.
And this is particularly true for, if you're running a firm, one of the most important things is that people can rely on you. They can trust you. They feel good about you. We have an updated definition of credibility I'll share. What's one of the ways to do that? You be on time. Being on time is being early. We actually had 23% of the people who were interviewed came late. Now, Roger, I define coming late because I was running a live show. I define coming late as coming 3 minutes to the hour.
Mm-hmm.
If as you could tell from today, I was sitting on your line about 12 minutes early, and it's just, for me, I just want to make sure I'm here, that I'm not the one who slows things down. But here's the thing that's really scary. 4% of the people I interviewed, this is 500 people. So this is 20 out of 500 who signed up to be interviewed for a live show. 20 came after the hour. Okay, so let me tie this threads together. You're being interviewed by the global credibility expert on your credibility, and you think it's credible to come after the hour for a live show. All right. So we'll do one more. Another stat that really, this happened. This happened to the extent that caused me to think about what I need to do in life. 98% of those people I spoke with could not articulate their purpose. 98%. And so, Roger, it's one of those things that, there's some people I ask and they go, "Oh yeah, Mitchell, of course." I did not expect that number to happen. And one of the things that came out of it is me having a superpower of helping people do that, to be able to articulate their purpose in 10 words or less. And the thing is, if you can do that, if you can articulate your purpose in 10 words or less, it's a compass. And that compass guides you in a way that it makes it easy to make decisions of what you can do and what you don't do. And also who can recommend you and why. Because, not all accounting firms are the same. There are differences. And so what's one focus of one firm? What's one focus of the people inside the firm that are different? And that really was a powerful element that came out of the interviews.
The first thing that I'm going to touch on both of those, but the first thing that you brought up about timeliness and being on time, that one struck me when I first met you, simply because of the fact that you shared that statistic with me. And I realized then how important it is to be on time. And I'm going to share with you a few reasons why. One, especially in the accounting world, there's this perception that there is an attention to detail. And that attention to detail, if there is a meeting starting at a particular time, need to be somewhere at a specific time, to arrive early shows that you're attentive to that detail and you're sensitive to that other person. Another thing that I learned around the same time that we were having that same conversation is I learned that there's a lot of people who are very sensitive to their time. It's very precious to them. And when we abuse that time, show a neglect for it or a disregard for it, what it does is it implies that we have a disregard for so many other things that are also important. And one of the things that I really took from that lesson in my own life is the fact that in working with business owners, if I'm not sensitive to their time and prompt when we've agreed to meet, where else am I going to be insensitive when they're then a paying customer? If right now I'm trying to impress them and put my best foot forward and get them as a client, let's say, if I'm abusing that right at the beginning when I haven't even taken their money, what am I going to do when I take their money and I've closed the deal already, let's say? And so what we need to do is be respectful of time and understand that it is a priceless commodity and we need to treat it with respect and as best we can be timely. Would you add anything more to that?
Oh, I no, you did a great job. If if I have a meeting with my accountant, and we're going to go through my books, and the accountant comes consistently late, I have a choice. Do I actually just change my barometer so I come late as well? And that's, by the way, not the way I want to live. Or do I find a new accountant? Because if I can't trust my accountant to come on time, what else can I not trust that person with? Right. And so there are some professions where I think as a human, it's important to respect somebody's time, but there's a certain level of specificity that is associated with running the numbers, running the books for a company, and and being credible, and an element of credibility. I mean, there's so many different elements, but one of them is the simplistic component of just showing respect for the person that you're engaging with, and not paying attention to the time. If you're doing it with a prospect, I mean, hey, you won't get hired. If you're doing it with a client, it could be painful enough at some point in time they go somewhere else.
That's right. And, the word credibility carries with it, I think, so much meaning. I'm sure there's a good conversation we can have about this, but as it relates to time, one of the things that I just think that's very important to realize is either we're respecting the commitment that we've made to be there on time and we're credible with that commitment, or we're not. I mean, it's a black and white issue. You're either on time or you're late. It's either you're there early or you're not. And that credibility, that word, just I think it just captures well what we're talking about with this promptness or timeliness of just respecting people's time. So that's a great thing. Now, I also pointed out that your emphasis on what you refer to as a CPOP, and many people will be familiar with it as like a 30-second commercial. It's just, can you articulate in very few words clearly what it is you do and how someone benefits from what it is you offer? And you were mentioning that there were a number of people that just couldn't explain well what that was. Obviously, that's a shock, but elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well, so a number is an understatement, Roger. So 98%. So you could almost say, and let's take it to a new level. 98% of people cannot articulate who they serve and the pain point they address in 10 words or less. 98% of people could not articulate their business purpose or their life purpose. Potentially, you could go as far as to say 98% of people were born, live, and die without ever actually realizing why they were here.
Oh, my.
Okay. I know I'm thinking about that. I'm like, that's crazy. So here's what's interesting. I believe with access to technology, access to information, for those people who are credible and want to be credible and want to be, one of the core components of credibility is being a servant leader, want to be of service to others. Being able to live your true purpose and to be able to articulate it in a way that people remember. So let me share mine, and then I'll give you a formula for what is a CPOP. So CPOP is a term I came up with. Now, it's really interesting. So, Roger, when you and I first talked, CPOP stood for customer point of pain, which, that was when I first originally started it. And then I said, well, it's customer point of pain, customer point of pleasure, right? So it could be an aspiration point versus a pain point. And very recently, one of my long-term friends, we did an exercise. We came up with this CPOP. He goes, Mitchell, I'm not going to call it customer point of pain. I'm just going to call it customer point of possibilities. I said, you don't have to use that. And I'm like, oh, yeah. As soon as I heard it, customer point of possibilities. So that really what it is. And mine, Roger, it typically starts with who you serve. And so for me, it's business leaders. And then it is, what is that either pain point or aspiration point that they're looking for? And it's for me, it's very simple. Business leaders wanting more business credibly. And then the question becomes, what happens, and this is the mistake everybody makes. It's not a commercial on you. When somebody says, what do you do? They really don't care. I want that to drop for a second. When somebody says what you do, they don't care. What they care about is what you could do to help them or somebody they know. So if you're wasting words by saying, I do this or we do that, you're not only wasting words that are not memorable, but what you're also doing is, for some people, as soon as you start, oh, well, we serve these people doing those things, what you really do, oh, we're the best accountants in the world. Like when you start doing that, they go, wait, they're trying to sell me something. And there are people who turn on their anti-sales meter, sort of like having a ad blocker on your computer. They have a salesperson blocker. They don't hear you. So what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to paint a playground that you play in, so that it's very easy for the person to say, that's a playground I might have interest in, or that's a playground that I just talked to a friend who has interest in. Tell me more. And so it typically starts with accounting firms, firms that, or recently public firms, or startup companies, or firms between 50 and 100 million struggling with, right? It's something that makes it very easy for the person who's listening to want to ask the question, tell me more.
Exactly. If you can get them to ask, tell me more, that's where you're going to be able to elaborate. It's basically a two-step process. It's we work with X to Y. It's that formula right there. And by identifying who your ideal customer is and how they benefit from your services, it inclines the person to then say, well, tell me more about either the potential client, the customer, what that means, or the service and how they're benefiting. Now, you touched on a few things that I think are worth elaborating on. When you were speaking about they need to hear what's in it for them, it's referred to as WIFM, what's in it for me. And the other thing is you spoke of the ad blocker, that proverbial thing that we put up our defenses and we kind of turn away people. For years, we've taught it in the way like Charlie Brown is depicted hearing adults. It's that wah, wah, wah. You just tune it out and you just don't hear or understand what's being said. So you gave a great portrayal of that. But the thing that really resonated with me a moment ago is as you started, you pointed out that so many people go through life without purpose. And I would tie to that the word passion. When you just live life or exist in life and never really tap into your purpose or passion, it's what I see a lot of people, especially the younger people that I'm working with as I work with young adults and teenagers, is they fail to tap into why they are alive. And not having that purpose or that passion is leading so many of them to depression and a sense of being. And you're nailing that at the beginning there, I think was hugely important, because when we don't have purpose, we just kind of aimlessly go through life. So is there anything more you would share related to either purpose or, as I said, passion?
Oh, absolutely. And first, I want to say you've got to, and you fell into the trap too, Roger. You can't. It's not we do this and tell me more, because it's not about we at all. Mm-hmm. It really is. I'll give you an example, and I'll bundle in the purpose. So there's somebody I've known for 3 or 4 years. She's an amazing woman. It's hard not to fall in love with her when you engage with her, because she lives out loud. And her title is hypnotherapist.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about those that are listening, but if you're like me, I don't know how to recommend a hypnotherapist. And she and we spent hours, we were at an event together. We spent hours walking. And I wanted to recommend her multiple times, but I couldn't. It was hard to wrap my arms around. As somebody who says, technically, I'm an accountant or I'm a hypnotherapist, I'm like, what does that mean? And how do I do it? Because you've seen hypnotherapists on stage helping people stop smoking and all this other stuff. And mm-hmm. and we went through the CPOP exercise recently. And it turns out that her CPOP is 4 words. And all of a sudden, those 4 words, I've already recommended her twice. And for her, those 4 words, lost moms reclaiming themselves. And in essence, what happens is she works with mothers who get lost, either because the son or father is an alcoholic or gets some sort of drug abuse, and they fall into trying to save the male, or their daughter has some sort of superpower, like they're on a spectrum somewhere and they're trying to help the daughter fit into society. And mm-hmm. and she works with those moms. I know how to recommend that. Right. And what's interesting, when I said, how do you feel? Her answer was, Mitchell, this is what I've been doing for 12 years. This is what I love doing. And I now can share it with other people. And when she was talking about it, you could hear it in my voice too. When she was talking about it, she was talking about it from her soul. She was talking about this from her passion. And so if you're listening to this, I want you to ask yourself, when you wake up every morning, are you loving what you do? Did you end up picking a profession that is exciting? Because there are so many different aspects in the world of accounting. And there are many things you could do that are just boring and not exciting to you. Well, hopefully you have other people in your firm who can do that. And there are many things you could do that when you are, the forensic accountants or My favorite thought of thinking about accounting is giving the client who has no time, giving them a simple scorecard of a happy face, a straight line, or a frown based on how they're doing, right? And then
Yep.
them wanting to ask, tell me more. If you wake up in the morning and you love what you do, here's the cool part. All you have to do is figure out how to say it so people can feel it. Now, if you're waking up in the morning and you don't love what you do, the question is, how do you change it? How do you outsource what is not exciting to you so that you can create you don't live for tomorrow, right? That's what this lie we've been told is, hey, we're going to get a job, we're going to make money, we're going to have enough money in the bank so that when we retire, we can then do the stuff we really want to do. That is a falsehood. That is one of those marketing cookie cutter approaches we've been sold, which is not the right approach. So as you mentioned, Roger, the younger generation is now saying, well, wait a second. I want to live for today and I want to do something of value. I want to do something that is at the core of what I'm excited about. And if you're running an accounting firm, that's your job, is to put those new people coming in into roles that they're passionate about. Because you know what's interesting? Not just the clients will feel it when working with them, prospects will be attracted to those people who are living, working, breathing their passion.
That attraction that you spoke of, it is contagious. When an accountant or any person for that matter actually gets excited about what they do and the impact they're having with their clients, it resonates. And all of a sudden people are drawn to it and they want to be a part of that. To simply say that we perform tasks or do reports or whatever, it's not sexy. What they want to hear is that thing that we're passionate about. So I'm going to kind of switch this up a little bit. You've had this opportunity to work with or speak to so many of these leaders. With those conversations, what were some of the highlights that you took that kind of complemented this principle of credibility? What were some of the things that you were caught basically off guard by that all of a sudden you realize that is just an example of, again, credibility?
Well, that's a really nice question. Let me start with sort of an obvious answer for me in terms of things I'm thinking about. And as I'm speaking, I want to come up with the really most amazing surprise stuff. One of the things that's interesting is I didn't realize up front that I needed to be grabbing testimonials when I'd interview people, and so
Okay.
I didn't start till like about 100 in. I've got over 475 video testimonials of people telling me that, wow, this is the first time I've been able to articulate my purpose and get people to trust, know, and like me in a short period of time.
Good.
And so there's so many of those of people who just, and maybe it's for the first time in their lives, they feel like they're in alignment. Let me give you one of the negatives and something that could be really important for those that are listening. There was a guy I interviewed, and this is when I only had 9. I've got 10 skills associated with credibility. And by the way, he never gave the definition, so I'll just do it quickly. Credibility is the quality in which people trust, know, and like you. And, given that we talked about respect up front, you could say trust, know, and respect you, but respect is a component of being liked. And so there are 10 skill sets. And before I interviewed this one person, this was actually an interview that didn't happen. I only had 9. And so what happened is I had the guy come on and I said, hey, what's your CPOP? And he gave his traditional 30-second elevator pitch. Oh, I do this to these people and make them, dance in the clouds, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking for something that's 1 to 3 seconds response. I'm looking for something that's less than 10 words. And I said, well, some people just talk about, well, who they serve and what is their pain point or what is their pleasure point. And he was able to shorten it, but he shortened it down to 15 seconds. And then I asked magic words. I said, do you mind if I do a little bit of coaching? And his response was, yes, I do. He goes, I have my way of doing things and you appear to have yours and I don't want to learn yours. And the end result of that one is we didn't do the interview. I was smart enough to be in, or maybe I was in such shell shock that I just was quiet for an extra second or two. And he goes, I don't think this is going to work out between the two of us. I said, I agree with you. Best of luck with everything you do. But that's, to me, that shock, which was to me an extremely pleasant shock, is the recognition that one of the skill sets that was missing is coachability. So under being trustworthy, it's important to be authentic. It's important to have external integrity. It's important to be vulnerable. And because of this one interview, it's important to be coachable. So that was one of the interesting positive shocks. I think something else, Roger, that was fascinating is when you and I talked last, and I had to 10 skills. I knew with 100% certainty that of all the skill sets, there's one that appears twice, and it's integrity.
Interesting.
So I have integrity under the column of being trustworthy. I also have integrity under the column of being known. And under being known, it's demonstrating your desire to serve others, basically being a servant leader. It's showing the intent and commitment to do the right thing and having internal integrity. When you and I talked last, I had integrity twice, but I didn't know why. I just knew that it was 2 of 10, not 1 of 10. And it was so funny. I was talking with a woman by the name of Cheryl Lynn. Her focus in life is joy.
Okay.
And she said something that I couldn't unhear. And the next day I woke up and I understood why I have it twice. So first, let me tell you what Cheryl Lynn, who, like I said, her focus is on joy. What she said was, happiness is external and joy is internal. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then I woke up in the next morning and then I realized why integrity was there twice. Your external integrity is associated with you being trustworthy.
Okay.
Your internal integrity is, as I get to know you, it's associated with you being known. And this, Roger, is where many politicians and other people in the public's eye make a mistake. Like they may have phenomenal records in terms of their external integrity and who they are and what they do. But then you see them cheating on their spouses or cheating on their taxes or, even cheating on their diet. And for people who are in the public eye, it's really important it is absolutely really important to be one of those people who really has internal integrity as well as external integrity.
I like how you've described the two being distinctly different, but yet the same. The word obviously has its own definition, but you've correctly shown how there's an external or outward manifestation of that, but there's also this internal integrity with ourselves and with us being genuine with who we intend to be and who we feel we are. So I liked how that distinction came out. And those stories that you were sharing there are, obviously highlights of all of these interviews that you've had as they stood out from the norm. So here's something that now I'd like to go into, and it's the fact that you've now since built a community of people striving to refine their credibility. Tell us how that all got started.
I'm going to go back to a month before I was finished. I was finished with the interviews.
Okay.
It's one of those things, and this is something that's not credible. Having a large ego is not really credible. And what happened is when so many people would say to me, "Hey, Mitchell, I've been trying to find my purpose. I've been trying to articulate and have clarity in who I am and how I serve. I've been trying to do this." And then the numbers they would say for 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, 12 years. I don't know why the number 12. There's a lot of people who say 12.
Wow.
And Mitchell, you helped me do this in 5 minutes. And so that's when my ego was saying, hey, I'm really good at this stuff, right? It's a superpower. And by the way, I'm going to say, yes, I have a superpower on clarity. But I'm going to take it the next step. I believe what I do is teachable. I believe of being able to listen to somebody, hear their inner thoughts. Roger, this is you're a great interviewer. And as a human, our interactions have always been one that I feel comfortable with.
Thank you.
You're going to ask the right, you're absolutely welcome. You're going to ask the right questions. You're going to focus in the right area. You're going to poke and see what people really think about. That's why you're successful at doing what you're doing. And so you would be somebody that would be easily trainable once I create this certification program on how you can be I'll call it a Creditability Nation certified CPOP specialist. But when I realized that what I was doing is teachable, and now let's tie it to what I said at the beginning, 98% of people cannot articulate their purpose, and what I'm doing is teachable. So what it means is we've been taught wrong. If essentially the world cannot articulate their purpose, this is not something that's been important in people's mind. And if we've been taught wrong, what else have we been taught wrong about?
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up doing a TEDx. It was the 28th most popular TEDx in 2021. It's called We Are Losing Our Humanity. And I'm tired of watching it happen. And what I talk about is, hey, listen, we could be much more humane to each other if we did nothing more than act credible. And some people would say, Roger, and I hear it a lot, Mitchell, everything you're talking about is common sense. And I'm going to say, yes, it is. And for some odd reason, we have allowed society and so many people who claim themselves to be experts to deliver marketing cookie cutter approaches that may work, but they may not be credible. And so what came out of that, basically the 11th of the 12th month of me interviewing is the desire to focus on a single purpose for me for the rest of my life. And that is to help people tip the scale, to help people be more credible versus the other. And I call the other dubious.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to be more credible than dubious, this is something that has to go way beyond what Mitchell Levy can do. And so part of it is having a community. So we have a community called Creditability Nation. And it's Roger, the cool part, it's $100 a year, right? I deliver $1,000 a year worth of value because it's $97 a month is what I'm delivering. But I felt uncomfortable standing up in front of a room and saying, hey, listen, credibility is a journey. It's not a one-time event.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to go on the journey for the rest of your life. I'd love you to go on the journey with me. And it only costs you $1,000 a year. That didn't feel credible to me. So that's why it's $100 a year. It makes it easy for companies to sign up all their employees. And the one thing that we do, and I was gonna get to this, is we started doing a quarterly event. And the quarterly event, its incarnation, I think I did it 6 times as a 5-day challenge.
Okay.
And as a 5-day challenge, what it was called Being Seen as Credible, is each day, first, we want somebody to articulate their purpose. I have their CPOP. And then we want to look at how they show up both asynchronously and synchronously. So we spent 4 days on how they show up online, because if somebody is a prospect and they're checking you out, they're going to check out your employees, they're going to check out your firm, they're going to check you out on social media. How do you show up? Do you reinforce who you say you are? And so the last time we did it was so incredibly amazing. I mean, we just changed lives. One of the things that happened, though, is we did have people come. It was for an hour a day for 5 days.
Okay.
And we did have people come, and they came one day, they missed one, they came the next. And what I realized is we needed something that was just, I want people to take 2 days out of their lives and completely get aligned with themselves credibly. So we created something. It's a 2-day event. It's Ultimate Credibility Boot Camp. And my promise for those that go through the Ultimate Credibility Boot Camp, if you go and you go seriously and you really just participate, I promise you will be a different person at the end. I mean, you will transform your life, and maybe you don't follow all the things we talk about. You're going to follow the things that's relevant for you, and people are going to see a difference because you're going to come across as the person that your mom wanted you to be, your grandma wanted you to be. You're going to come across credibly.
Yeah.
And people feel it, and they just know it when they see it, when they feel you, when they experience you.
You know, as you're sharing that, there's a few things that come to mind. One is the word genuine or authentic, but also being sincere. I really feel that if you can get to that genuine core of who we each are, it's like you were mentioning earlier, there's a common sense to all of this. There's very little ahas or surprises. It's not necessarily we're learning anything new. It's probably things your mother or grandmother taught us. You don't necessarily get surprises as to what a good person is. What the challenge is actually implementing and doing it, being genuine and authentic with who we are and actually delivering on that. And just to share a related story, I was just meeting with a client a few days ago, and they were struggling with some things. It was actually not business related. Oftentimes the business clients that I work with, sometimes outside relationships, personal things will creep in and inhibit them to work on their business. And so we address those. And in this case, it was some marital issues and things going on with the children. And my point in bringing all this up is he knew what he needed to do. There wasn't any doubt what was right and what was wrong. He knew where he had made some mistakes in some communications and interactions with the family, and he knew he needed to mend those. And so one of the easiest ways to teach then how to address this is to step outside of oneself and just simply ask this very simple question: what would, and then say your name, do? What would say your name do? And when you put it into that context, I think a lot of us have an ideal for, I know better and I should have done something differently, or I should do it this way. And when you step out for a moment and just remove all the emotion, you can clearly identify what it is you really should be doing, and all of a sudden raise the bar for yourself and simply step up to the plate and do exactly what you ought to be doing. Some people find it akin to the phrase of what would Jesus do? That's a common one that's sometimes heard in society. And it's related to that. And it's just simply, what would you do? Your ideal self, your perfect you. What should you be doing? And boy, that really addressed the whole situation. He found himself becoming more genuine and authentic to his true self, and was able to go in and make amends for the things that needed attention and then get back to work. And what I'm hearing you share is a process to achieve that both personally and professionally.
Roger, I love what you just said, by the way, and thank you. I often talk about Mitchell Levy in third person because I'm an asset that my company needs to use to accomplish its goals. Mm-hmm. Right. But what would, in your case, Roger connect to? Yeah. What would Mitchell Levy do? That is so cool to be thinking about it that way, because what often happens is we get so in the moment. This is what you're saying. You get so in the moment, you don't think about what the right thing to do, and you just have to take a breather, right? You just have to step outside and go, and if you want to add one word to that, what would the credible Roger Connect do? Or what would the credible? I don't think it's necessary, but for when people first are thinking about doing the right thing, it's having that intent and commitment to do the right thing, having both your integrity, external and internal, aligned, being authentic, sharing your stage, showing respect. I mean, when you're thinking about what credibility is, sometimes we just need to be reminded. And if you're running a company, whether it's, a 10-person accounting firm or a 500 accounting firm, what would the credible CEO of the company do? And I love that. I will definitely use that going forward.
Well,
thank you.
You're more than welcome. And just to add to that, one of the things that comes up in that exercise is the word legacy. when you're trying to wrap your mind around who you are and who you're trying to become, it's the legacy. How do you want to be remembered and known? If someone was to speak of you and speak of you in your absence, what would you honestly want them to say about you? And so it's acting in accordance to that self, that when people are outside of your presence and speaking of you in past tense or even present tense, they're able to speak of you as being this person that you hoped they would see you as. And when I learned this and then also started teaching it to others, one of the things that I found is or at least I started to see, well, who am I? I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a friend. Well, what would, and maybe I need to elaborate on this a little bit. In one instance, it was a situation with a spouse, or excuse me, no, the first instance that I had this with was my son-in-law and his relationship with his mother. And I hope I'm not being too revealing here, but one of the first instances is when someone says, I'm acting this way because someone else is acting poorly. I said, that's not a good excuse. What would you as a son need to do in that situation? And when you think about it for a moment, someone else's poor behavior isn't an excuse for you to then act poorly. What is the definition of a good son? What is the definition of a good father? What is the definition of a good husband? What does a good husband do? Well, if the spouse is not being a good spouse, that doesn't justify you being also a bad spouse. It means you need to step up and be the good spouse. And we need to stop coming up with excuses and just be the ideal self we feel we should be. We all have in our minds what an ideal boss is, an ideal friend is. Well, if an ideal friend is someone who reaches out and asks someone to lunch and say, hey, I haven't seen you in a month, we should catch up. Well, then you should reach out and ask, let's go to lunch. Coincidentally, I have tomorrow morning a breakfast with two neighborhood friends, that one of which I saw at a funeral just a few weeks ago, and another I haven't seen for 30 years. Well, we're getting together because I said we should have breakfast together. Not, wouldn't it be nice? And I just think fantastically that it would occur. I'm actually in the process of saying, well, a good friend would say, let's reconnect. Well, therefore, let's reconnect and schedule it. It's making things happen. Be a doer.
I'm just going to say yes.
You got me on my soapbox, Mitchell.
Oh, sometimes here's what's really interesting. And we didn't quite talk about this. So I'm going to give you the 10th component of credibility.
Please.
And that is sharing your stage. And what's interesting is it's often, it's always this interesting battle, right? And battle is not always the right word. How about we say dance? And sometimes it's a battle and sometimes it's a dance between the person who's doing the interview and the interviewee. And what's fascinating is sharing your stage, which you do, and thank you so much for having me on your stage. Sharing your stage is also allowing, when the host goes off on a soapbox, for instance, being able to say, I agree. I don't need to add anything to that, Roger. That was freaking awesome, right? And the thing that's, you'll notice when I mention people's names before, or even when I mention the name of the person who had me really understand what was the difference between the two integrities, or even in my TEDx, I mentioned the name of one of my reviewers who gave me an amazing aha moment. That's part of being credible. Don't take the credit for yourself. You don't need to. Share your credit, share your stage. It makes you more likable. It makes you more respectful of those people you learn and grow from. So, Roger, by the way, when I do tell people that what would, and I'll say your first name, last name, what would your first name, last name, what would the credible person do? For at least a period of time, I'm going to say, I got this from Roger Connect. You should check him out.
You're wonderful. And thank you for that. It's interesting. When I started doing these podcasts some time ago, I really had to consider, how would I go about being the host, providing the platform, what would the listener experience? What would be the format for all this? And for years, I've been told I've got this radio voice and I've been on radio and I should do podcasts, but I never knew what the platform would look like and how the listener would gain from listening in. And a few years ago, I got that clarity and I got my voice in the sense of, like you've just said, a definition of what that dance on the stage would be like. And the compliments that I've gotten have been that with my guests, I've been able to have a conversation. And we've been able to let the listener listen in and eavesdrop on a dialogue. And I hope for so many of the listeners, that's what they're experiencing, is a moment of clarity and aha, listening to two people talk about things that matter. And if they can take from these conversations little gems and nuggets of what they could be doing to work on themselves personally and professionally, implementing in their business, then this is resonating with the people I hope it would. And I thank you for being on the show and dialoguing with me as we are.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. And it's been fun. It's been fun. It's been credible. And it really is. If this is captivating to you, and Roger, you do have a beautiful radio voice, right? And that said, we're not just listening to your voice. We're listening to you have a fireside chat with a friend, and people are enjoying that. And particularly with today's episode, if everything you heard was common sense, great. I'm just going to ask you the question. Do you, say your first name and last name, do you practice what you heard today?
Well, Mitchell, I think that's a good place to find our exit. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to recap a little bit of what I've taken from our conversation today, and then I'm going to come back and ask for a closing thought. So let me begin by mentioning a few offers in relation to this podcast and direct you, the listener, to the episode description where you're going to find this information along with the associated links. The first thing I'd like to point out is, obviously, Mitchell has these TED Talks that he's alluded to. I'm going to put the links there for you to actually have access to those. Go listen to them. Find out more about what this is, his Creditability Nation, and how we can become ourselves much more credible, be more clear, and at the same time, perhaps be persuasive in helping people realize how we can help them professionally and personally improve their situations. The second thing is he is, as we talked about, kind of founding and running this Creditability Nation, and you have an opportunity to get 2 months free as a member of this nation, and there learn some of the principles that Mitchell was speaking of and applying them in your own situation and benefiting from this exercise of becoming more credible and true to yourself. The third thing I'd like to mention is he did have a moment ago a mention of these events. Well, these are quarterly events and you're invited to participate. I invite you to go to the episode description and there find out how you can now register for the event and perhaps even save on the costs associated with attending and participating. It's definitely something worth doing. It is where you're going to tap into that inner self and find what it is you can do to become much more credible, not only to yourself being authentic, but also to the people that are so important to you in your life, both personally and professionally. So take advantage of the opportunity to not only check out his TED Talks, but becoming a member of the Creditability Nation and attending these quarterly events. With that being said, there's also an offer for you to get a copy of 2 books all accountants should have as part of their library. One of the books is a must-have. It is In the Black, 9 Principles to Making Your Business Profitable. It's literally the 9 principles you need to implement in your business to ensure that profit is purposeful and deliberate. These principles are not only for your company, but also for the clients that you're working with. And in addition to that, Red to Black in 30 Days. It's a small business accountant's guide to quick turnarounds. It's meant to help you work with your clients with the thing that they're stressed with, perhaps dealing with the most often, which is cash flow management. So with that being said, let me just summarize some of our conversation today. Having Mitchell come on the show, I knew we were going to be talking about these interviews that he has had, and I appreciate the update because speaking with so many leaders, influential individuals, people that are confident, it's nice to know what he's observed. And obviously, one of the things that we touched on is being timely. I can't emphasize enough this idea of punctuality. literally every time for the last 2 years that I have been late, which I am, I'm not perfect, I do think of Mitchell. So Mitchell's on my mind quite often because he's really hit home this idea of we need to be a respecter of not only our time, but other people's time. And we need to be prompt and punctual. And if nothing else, early to the appointments that we have, because that's what we want to do is lead and be an example to others. The other thing that I thought stood out was this idea of purpose and having basically passion, the CPOP, the idea of being able to communicate clearly what it is you do for people and how they benefit is very important. I think a lot of us struggle with trying to share that message and have a consistent message that resonates. We need to put time and attention to that. And hearing Mitchell actually explain that can be brought down into very few words or less than 10, 15 seconds is an acceptable challenge. What can we do to actually clarify our messages to be clear as to what it is we do and how people benefit? The third thing that I'd like to just draw attention to is the fact that Mitchell is someone who listens well. If you've taken away anything from this, you'll notice that he's very attentive to what it is people are saying and doing. And it's from that he takes that superpower of his own to really help people understand what it is they're communicating and how they can say it better. And I appreciate that fact about him. Mitchell is someone who's just basically coming at it with a genuine heart. And one of the things that I think is very obvious as you listen to him is he cares and he's trying to make the world a better place, bringing credibility to the relationships that we have. So with that, Mitchell, what is your closing thought?
I'm still glowing from that. Thank you, Roger. Oh, wait, I could hear more. What I was thinking before, and I'm going to say the same. If you're listening to this and you've been part of this planet for the last 5 or 10 years, and you've seen the negative trajectory that we're on. How about the last 5 weeks? How about the last 5 days? And you see what we're doing, and you're thinking to yourself, man, my kids, my grandkids, I don't want to be them. You can fix this. You can make a difference. You can start being more credible today. And I'm going to encourage you, if this was common sense, great, let's put it to practice. If this is something that you need, that your company will stand out, come and play with us over at Creditability Nation, or just watch and listen to this and this other stuff we're doing and just start living credibly. You can make business. Remember, my CPOP, business leaders wanting more business credibly. It is important for me to help change the world. And at the same time, as a business person, we all need to make money. We need to have a living, but we might as well do it in something that we love, because everyone around you will experience your passion, your pleasure, your importance, and you personally will be happier, not just because of what your company is doing, but all aspects of your life will feel that much better for you. And so come and join us at the Ultimate Credibility Boot Camp or Creditability Nation, or just share the TEDx. And I do, Roger, I'm with you. I do want to encourage all of us to be the better person, and just say to yourself, what would Roger Connect do? Sorry, couldn't help it.
Mitchell, that was too good. All right. Well, first of all, thank you. I'd like to think that I'm examples for someone, especially my children, but thank you. That was actually quite good. And you're right. There's a lot going on negative in the world that we can really dwell on. A lot of the travesties that are occurring, a lot of the turmoil that exists. There's a lot of things that is unfortunate and sad and scary about the world in which we live. But at the same time, I think we need to be that shining star, that person that can bring hope to the day-to-day lives that we're each living. And I have children right now that are starting their families, and I would hate for them to be worried about the world that they're bringing their children into. My grandchildren, I'd like to think that they'll be able to smile and be happy. And having lived in a third world country, I know it doesn't take much to be happy. You can have nothing and still find joy in this life. And so if we're able to at least realize that happiness isn't contingent upon so many of the outside circumstances, I'm hoping that we can be happy in the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So with that being said, let me just wrap things up. The first thing that I'd like to mention is if you haven't actually registered for GrowCon or would like to know more about our live events, feel free to check that out by going to the episode description. I do want to also encourage you to subscribe to this podcast as well as listen to our other episodes. We have a variety of topics that have been covered over the weeks, and we encourage you to check out our past episodes and be aware of each and every Wednesday the new episodes that are released. For more information about these principles and what you can do to apply these in your business, training your staff, yourself, and building the premier accounting firm in your area, check us out by going to universalaccountingschool.com or give us a phone call. You can reach us at 801-265-3777. And always remember this, if it's about accounting, it is universal. Take care and have a great day. Be safe out there.